We are entering week 9 in a handbook for new Stoics. And as we get to week 9, these are obviously sort of courses that kind of build. This one is all about how you label things language-wise. It's titled, Be Careful What You Call Good and Bad. And this ties into lessons that Sierra has and lessons that I have in our courses, which is why it's phenomenal. But it's really a great everyday lesson. So the point is, when you label things good, bad, or synonyms thereof, there's an emotional attachment to those words. So if you describe an event that happened to you as horrible, you're going to have a bad time emotionally to that event because you're going to continually call it horrible in your head. You're going to repeat that out loud. So the idea here is to not do that, really, is to just have the event be the event and describe it in different ways. At least that's how I interpreted it, in that the Stoic way, which they get into, is you should really only label the virtues, which are the 4 that they talk about, which are practical wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. And they basically have you come up with sort of like an A category and a B category. Your virtues will go in the A category, and then everything else will go in the B category.
Yeah, I think the big thing with this was it was more don't label the thing, because the thing is neither good nor bad. Yeah. It's really your interpretation of whatever that thing is. You know, a day can't be horrible. You know, I'm trying to think, a meal, the food can't be excellent or bad. You know, it's your interpretation of it, which I think is it's very telling, because that's where, you know, critics in general of any kind, food critics, movie critics, fill in the blank, whatever, it's always funny, disparity. Yeah, it's theater critics. Yes, theater critics. But it's always interesting because, you know, 2 people can attend or eat or watch the same exact thing, and they can label the thing 2 very different ways. And so it's really just being able to take that back and dial it back and not label the thing as either good or bad, but be able to recognize it's really your, I feel, or my experience was X.
Yeah.
Versus the thing itself. I also like that I'm trying to find, you know, they call it value judgments is the term that they refer to it as. And, you know, it isn't a simple fact. It's a value judgment as to what you're choosing to label it as. And with the A and B thing, they basically talk about the idea that everything in group A is really what's within your control. Those are your virtues. That's the only thing that you can ultimately control, is yourself and how you behave.
And if you're doing the virtuous thing.
And if you're doing the virtuous thing. But everything else is in essentially your B group. And that is everything that is outside of your control. And I think the interesting thing is that, you know, you have these classifications, like he uses an example, which is really great. He's like, my daughter is in the A, having a Lamborghini and $150,000, that's in my B. I would never trade my daughter for a Lamborghini. I'm not going to trade an A for a B, or rather a B for an A. So that's what they really talk about when it thinks about like classifying what is important to you, but making sure that the things that are most important to you are the things that that you have control over, if you will. How about you, Sierra? What were some of your takeaways? I have more, but we'll go to
I love how they say, this is on page 67, virtue, however, will always repay us. It is always firmly within our control. So I'll be honest with you, when I first read this chapter, now, you know, normally I don't say ugh to stuff, but when I first read this chapter, I was like, ugh, like, you want me to not say good and bad? Like, I was kind of like, I thought it was a little hokey. But I understand what they're trying to get us to do here. This is part of the process of, again, it's deeper into the dichotomy of control. It's like, okay, that this is your perception of the thing. And your perception of the thing is different than mine, that's different than Rob's. It's the perception. But also, like, it brings you back to all you can control is your virtue, and not applying your virtue to others, because as we've learned in previous chapters, your virtues for yourself are for yourself. Other people have their own story going on. So I like that this brings us where it's trying to get us to go is further understanding dichotomy of control and focusing on your own virtues and not on all this external stuff. For me, this had so many ties to a lot of Buddhist teachings that I have read and witnessed. It's very Buddhist, this part. In fact, it took me right back to, I was at a teaching that at the time, this section of the teaching was so over my head. I was so like, what? Where they showed a picture of a dog with a pen in its mouth. And he says, you look at this and know that the dog has a pen in its mouth, and you know that it's a pen. But what is it to the dog? How is it any different than a regular stick? It's just how you look at it. And at the time, I'm like, a pen, a stick, who cares? But I get it. It's about the perception of it. And whether or not it was a pen or a stick, the dog liked having it in its mouth. That was the virtue of the dog, was to have something in its mouth. Right?
It's like playing for him, whether it's a stick or the pen. So he's like,
Yeah.
But I like those, the external things too, because you mentioned a couple of them. So what they say, Seneca suggested true happiness consists in virtue. This is also on page 67. That's because external circumstances, job, friends, even relationships come and go in life. So if we let our happiness depend on those circumstances, we risk being constantly at the mercy of luck or of other people's decisions, which we cannot control. So just to kind of highlight what those external circumstances are those things that you cannot control. So you can't control, like when I talk to Amy, I can't control how she's going to respond to something I say. Now I could try to say it in a more effective way so that maybe her emotional reaction might be different, but I ultimately cannot control that.
Right. And again, I think, Sierra, let me know if this is correct, but I think part of the reason why you think, when you first approach this is you're like, well, so I'm not supposed to feel anything ever?
Right.
And it's like, no, you're you can experience joy, you can experience hurt, you're going to experience these things, but just be clear on what it is that you're experiencing, insofar as it's your interpretation, to your point, it's your perception of an external event, an external thing that's happening. So it's just being able to clearly delineate between what is within you, what's your virtues that you can control, and then everything else. So it's not saying turn off your emotions, experience them, but be able to clearly identify why it is you're feeling this way. Because one of the things they say right at the beginning of the lesson on 64, it says, when we use words to describe how we feel, it's accompanied by big emotions, good or bad. And just making sure that you are checking those big emotions. You're not stopping them from happening, your big feelings like you talk about, but being able to recognize that, no, that movie wasn't horrible. It's not a horrible movie. It was just, you didn't enjoy it. It wasn't a movie that jibed with you in some way, or that food was amazing. Well, no, the food itself is just food. It was how you consumed it and the experience that you had with the food that was amazing. So I think that was the big, I really liked that. But I liked the focus on the virtues. And they said that virtue is the only true good, and acting unvirtuously is the only true bad. So if you're going to label good and bad, it's labeling what you yourself are doing as good or bad. Everything else is interpretation, right? Everything else is interpretation.
I'll give you an example. So Friday, my buddy Mike and my buddy Justin, we're all going to go do some target practice. So with all of the things going on, we're filming this during the middle of the COVID pandemic. There are different rules. So it's an outdoor shooting range. So Mike said, hey, let's meet up at a particular time. We'll meet at the range. So we all go up there, we meet. Turns out you needed reservations. None of us knew that. Now, Mike took ownership of that because he's the one that organized this. And if you go on the website for this particular shooting range, it's not apparent right from the get-go. So, but I did not label this event, and it was because of this lesson, because it happened during this week, where I was like, okay, so we didn't have a reservation. We drove, okay. I don't need to label this as, oh, well, Mike, that looks bad on you, because it didn't matter, because we went out to breakfast and we still hung out.
Right.
So it wasn't a good event or a bad event. It just happened that we didn't realize we needed reservations.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you even checked
Moving
me
on.
on it, because I think that night when you came home, I was like, oh, how was, or maybe it was midday because you came in between. I was like, oh, how was shooting? You're like, oh, we didn't get to go because of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh, that's disappointing. And he's like, no, it's not disappointing. And I'm like, ah, you're right.
It just was.
That is not disappointing. You know, not being able to shoot is not disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been, but it wasn't unvirtuous of Mike. He didn't drive us out there on purpose.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you could back it out too and say that, like, your ultimate goal of the outing was for you guys to be able to spend time together. Mm-hmm. And even though you probably would have liked to have done the shooting too, like, you still got to hang out together. So if you focus on the goal being hanging out together, then you did it, right?
Right. Yep. Exactly. That's such a great point, Sierra.
And even though I had to get up earlier than I normally do, I'm like, but I mean, it was a choice. I'm like, I chose to do this. It doesn't, I'm awake now. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because you guys getting up early is dispreferred for you guys.
Yes,
dispreferred. Yes, actually, a preferred. Yes, dispreferred.
So explain that a little bit.
Sierra can't, but here, Sierra, you talk about dispreferred.
So the Stoics try to tell us to get us to relabel or to change our thinking of it. This feeds right into the good or bad, right? Is that a non-Stoic might say that Amy and Rob hate to get up early if they don't have to. But the Stoics would say it's not preferred, it's dispreferred. So their preference is to get up later in the day. And because they don't have children, they can choose that preferred action of the hour that they get up, which I'm often jealous of, because I have a child that is, if 7 o'clock comes and goes without him waking up, the only way that's happening is if he's sick. Otherwise, he's awake. So while I be with you in the preferred, I have to kind of just roll with what I've got. But instead of thinking likes or dislikes, it's preferred or dispreferred. So even if you would have preferred to have gone to the shooting range, but that wasn't available, still got goal.
Right. Exactly. And that's a perfect time, because it talks about going back to the column A and column B, the virtues, and then everything else. They talk about what's in column A are your virtues, and everything else is in column B. And what they talk about, they use an example of which each of these lessons, they always at least cite one kind of real world-ish example. And they talk about the character, the avatar, if you will. And it said that the things that this character, Leela, feels she should be happy about are all in her B set. So it's her relationship, the good times she has with friends, her job. And it says that a lot of people don't experience satisfaction or fulfillment in their life because most of their energy and their effort is spent on their B's, not their A's. And it says that if you focus more on your A's, which are your virtues, the things that you can control, the good that you can do to yourself and to others, then that will actually help fill up your joy tank, to use a term from last week. Fill up that joy tank and not focus so much to what you said, not putting your fulfillment and your happiness on everything or things in your B set. That doesn't mean you're like, fuck the B's. It's just more that the A is going to fill you up, and then anything that happens in B is just cherry on top. It's the bonus, the sprinkles on the cupcake.
And you have a different sort of set of views when you take that approach. And the reason I pulled out my phone is because we're surrounded by descriptive words based on the media that we consume. So here's an example from the Atlantic magazine. And I read this article, and it's about the pandemic. It's the words they chose to describe the pandemic. Like, here's the title: A Devastating New Stage of the Pandemic. So if you're like me and you read articles all the time because I work in the news business, I'm seeing words like devastating. This word, the terrible, is used in this article. And they're trying to describe all kinds of different things about what COVID-19 is, when the reality is, it is a virus. It is neither good nor bad. Now, if you get it, it's not pleasant, obviously, but describing the virus this way does not necessarily help, because it makes people more fearful over the long run. Because I bet you if they did a language study, what would they call it in this? Alexa, whatever, there's a word in here that I loved.
Lexicographic preferences.
Yeah, if they did a study on lexicographic preferences on how the news media has covered COVID-19, we would see fear-inducing words much more prominently placed than neutral words that say, here are the number of cases, this is what it means, this is the number of people that are contagious, but that's not what it is. It's fear-inducing to get clicks or reads or views or whatever, and we're surrounded by them. But if you take this approach in week 9, you can recognize what's going on a little bit more aptly and go, okay, is it truly devastating? Well, not necessarily.
Well, but again, it's that author's interpretation
Correct.
of the events that are happening. And I think that's the biggest problem, is that, be it in, we create our own headlines in our minds,
yes,
right?
We do.
Essentially. So, and it's a lot of it is because of how we've been conditioned. So, we constantly are berated with pre-labels on things that, as soon as you see that word, it triggers an emotional reaction, whether you intend it or not. So when you see something that says devastating, you go, oh man.
Yeah, let me read you more here. This is two sentences. The American coronavirus pandemic is once again at risk of spinning out of control. A new and brutal stage now menaces the Sun Belt states, whose residents face nearly an unbroken chain of outbreaks stretching from South Carolina to California.
Wow, that is some dramatic prose.
Yep. Across the South and large parts of the West, cases are soaring, hospitalizations are spiking, and a greater portion of tests is coming back positive. So again, you read that, and it's all these descriptive words that the Stoics would say, don't describe things like that. Describe the event. Here's the number of new cases. Here's how far they lag behind, because they're not giving you context either, so it makes it even worse.
Yeah. Even when you look at, now that it's been several months, is that now companies in their marketing have had a chance to tool their marketing very carefully. And if you listen over and over, you hear things like these challenging times, these unprecedented times, these unstable times, these unsure times. It's almost like, from a marketing perspective, they're setting you up to be right there, to be like, well, it's unstable, it's challenging, so that means I should throw money at the problem, right? Like that, you're basically giving me permission to spend more money than I would have intended to, because it's unstable, or this is challenging. You've just told me how hard this is for me. You're not telling me that we're going to get through this. You're telling me that there's a problem, and you're offering me a solution to my problem. And the way I get the solution is through my pocketbook or through my wallet, however you want to say it. So it's very finely crafted that way. And, it's an election year too, which I think we forget about. But, when you get into any type of an election year, you get all kinds of these crafted messages to get you to feel something, to get you to act a certain way. And how you craft the message has everything to do with what you're setting up those perceptions to be. Now, maybe not everybody will react that way, but the majority of people, when you throw that many, you read just like 2 sentences, there was at least 5 scary words in there, right? So if you throw enough scary words out, you're going to get people to shift at least partway into a place of fear. And when people get into a place of fear, fight or flight.
Yep. They don't think with their rational mind.
No.
Their emotional mind.
But it's being overpowered. I mean, if that's the,
It's like inundated.
but that's one of my big theories, is that language is contagious, and that's a perfect example. And it's essentially what they're saying in week 9 of our Stoic handbook here, is that it is. And it's contagious in 2 ways. It's contagious in the language you consume and hear and see, whether it's Sierra's marketing point or this news article. It's also contagious in how you say it in your own head. So if you describe work as horrible, it sucks, I don't want to go to work, you're not going to ever want to go to work, despite the fact that the reason you have a roof over your head, or the reason you get to go out to eat, or the reason you get to, maybe send your kid to college. Those all can be positive ways to spin your job, even if every moment of it you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
But, you don't like any, it's not possible like every moment of everything. So we take those little moments and like, this is horrible, the commute stinks, or whatever. And the more negative you label them, the more negative your mindset will be.
Right. Yeah, there's a great quote, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but basically, Sierra, back to your point, it's that basically don't become a puppet of your emotions where you allow external events or people to control you. Basically, don't let them pull on your strings in that way. And I think that's so true, and that's where really being able to take that step back. Again, you're not Mr. Spock. You're not the traditional view of what a Stoic is. You're not turning off your emotions. You're just simply being able to separate the trigger, the event, from the emotion itself. It goes very much back to your ABCDs.
I underlined this on page 70. The goal of this exercise is to start prying those labels off of externals that are not completely within our control, and put them only on what's in our control, namely our moment-to-moment character.
Yeah.
So we can feel these things, but being able to have the clarity to see that they are labels, and to see the goal of like, to your point, Rob, the words, or the words that we like to put on things automatically without thinking, is that they just want you to start to look at that. And by examining that, it's like seeing it is the first step. Acknowledging is always the first step. So they're just trying to bring our attention to this so that we can dive deeper into it.
Right. And not let the words hijack or affect your behavior in an unhealthy way.
So what did you guys think? Because I agree, and I think that's all fantastic. And how you intended to go about, because at least in this lesson, they kind of have you put an intention out there. And that's kind of what mine was, and you guys are similar in that, notice the words that I use to describe things. And then, like this news article, notice the words other people use to describe them too. And then because I'm aware of them, I can see the word in a different way and know that it's a descriptive word, but that doesn't reflect my feelings, nor should it, about COVID or any other thing that someone else may describe.
Right. So for me, the implementation intention that I wrote down, I was like, man, I didn't quite perfect what that might be, because I started to write, I'm like, okay, anytime I start to take an it, whatever that it is, and give it an adjective that is a good or bad adjective, to try to catch myself. But I'm like, gosh, we do that so often that I was like, how can I really?
Because that's how in a lot of ways, you showcase your vocabulary by your descriptive words.
Yes.
And that's something you're taught since you learn how to speak, is how to describe things.
Mm-hmm.
And the more ways you can describe things, the smarter you're perceived, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and again, descriptions aren't bad. It's just the type of description, red, tall, short, long, those are fun descriptions. It's the good, the bad, the awful, the terrible, the fantastic, what have you. It's those that, again, you can experience it, but don't let it hijack you in your state, both either for good or for bad, to put all of your eggs in that emotional basket, especially if those feelings are due to external factors. If you're getting that, if you're like, man, I did awesome today because I acted virtuously, then cool, whatever, great, that's awesome, good for you. See, I haven't said that's awesome. It's like it's our core language, but I think it's just conditioning, because I really struggled with trying to find a specific trigger, because I'm like, it permeates everything that we do. So how can I track it? And maybe to your point, Rob, it starts with what you read. So when you read something, be it an article, a headline, starting there, so that way visually you can become more aware of those good, bad labels. And then over time, as you do that, maybe then you can start to detect language, more the verbal that's happening, both coming from yourself and others. I don't know. What about you, Sierra?
I feel like it's about developing your own filter.
Mm-hmm.
Is everything that's happening, how are you filtering it? I love that saying, like, take it with a grain of salt.
Mm-hmm.
It's filter to, like, okay, one filter that you could have is, what do I have control over? So I wrote, my virtues are all I have control over. That's a good reminder anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then focus on my virtues. So filter in whatever is happening, not only what's happening, but what my knee-jerk reactions are, good, bad, horrible, blah, blah, blah. But how can I shift that and filter that to where my virtues are really at?
Mm-hmm.
And then I just wrote, try to separate the labels from the reality.
Yeah.
And that's my filter is going to be different than your filter. And that's just because we have different sets of virtues. We have different sets of experiences. So just kind of fine tuning that filter. And I think that goes for all areas of your life too. I mean, it goes back to like, I was just filming a section about how I in my radical mindfulness, about how I gave a presentation that I knew was really not I didn't do a good job. I wasn't prepared. And a coworker said to me, that was a train wreck. And how I could have filtered that one way and thought, she is a bitch, right? I could have filtered it and put it on her. But really, it hurt my feelings because I knew it was true. And instead, I can filter and say, what about my virtues? My virtues did not do a good job here because I didn't apply myself to the presentation. So having that filter on, it's that the filter isn't about what she said. The filter is, how do I need to look at my virtues? And to this whole week 9 is about, the only thing that you can truly label good or bad are your own virtues and how you look at your virtues. Mm-hmm. So to me, I had not acted to my virtues, which was to always do my best. Mm-hmm. So I think just having that filter, and to your point about the news story too, it's like, they can write it that way and they have their own reasons for writing it that way. But how do you filter so that you choose your reaction to the story?
Right.
And be aware of it, which is that huge first step, which again is, there's that filter. How do you filter things? So that's like a nice, like sifting for gold, right? And just picture it kind of that way, which is kind of cool. And I love just the idea that you can control it. You don't have to be affected by all these other outside factors.
Right.
Because I think ultimately that's what we're getting at here as we progress week to week. It's, you get to be in control of you. And this is a perfect lesson to kind of go back and re-examine what your virtues actually are.
Right. Exactly. And then also, I think, be clear-eyed with the way you label other things as well, because there's ultimately your virtues exactly are what you have control over, and whether you yourself are acting virtuously. But the judgment or the labels that we assign to other people and other things often are a reflection of what we've defined as virtuous or not. And just being able to, again, to recognize that, is Steve a bad person? That's that label. Is Steve a bad person? No. Steve as an entire being is not a bad person. What Steve may have just said doesn't align with a value or a virtue that you find, important. But that doesn't make Steve a bad person. It goes back to like Marcus Aurelius. He says like people, in this Stoic principle, people aren't inherently bad. They just,
Right.
they do what they do based upon their values that they have subscribed to or that have defined them. So, very, very few people, if any, are intentionally trying to do harm to you, to others, to themselves. It's just they don't know any better because of what they've been conditioned and how they've been conditioned to behave. So I think it's just, again, always operating from that place of virtue, both from yourself, Sierra, to your point, which I think is an excellent way to view it. I think it's a great activity, actually, at the end of the day, to take just a couple minutes and evaluate your day and say, in what ways did I act in alignment with my virtues? And in what ways did I not? And again, it's not meant to, that self-flagellation, right? It's not meant to do that, bad Amy, or, but at the same time, it's meant to be able to provide a reflection and say, okay, how can I do better tomorrow? With the way I behave, with the quality of work that I do, whatever it may be, but being able to take that assessment and just use that as your litmus test. Was I aligned or misaligned? And is this behavior that I'm observing or experiencing, is it aligned or misaligned with what I've defined as my virtues? But yeah.
So we like to.
The crazy is not going to stop.
No.
Don't make it get worse.
The world will turn. The crazy will continue.
Mm-hmm.
You will never have complete control over that. So it's, I think, at the end of the each of these weeks, it asks, if you think this exercise is useful, check this box. It's, there's the progression. And I wrote so for this week because I said I can see the progression. I can see the process of they're trying to get us to start peeling that back, to start looking at that a little deeper. It's a process. Like this whole life, this is all just a process of stuff. And how are you going to learn from it? How are you going to move forward?
Right. Exactly. And just being able to, because I even in the weekly review, it's like, did you find yourself desiring and being averse to externals a little less? And again, it's not with everything. It's not saying don't experience them. It's just don't, as they said back on page 67, don't let your happiness or your joy tank or your fulfillment be primarily based on externals, because then you're always at the mercy of luck or other people's behaviors or decisions or actions. Focusing more on what you as an individual can do. Fill up everything that you can do virtuously for yourself and for others. And then again, everything else is just icing on it.
I want to dig into Sierra's so-so. We can end on this note.
Okay.
Why do you feel, Sierra, that it's so-so? Is it because of what Amy said? Is it because of the feels? Go more into that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I just at the first with this, the way that they kind of set this up, I was like, because when I started doing they asked us at the beginning to write a bunch of synonyms, for good and bad, is I went crazy. I wrote a bunch. And I'm like, wow, okay, well, if you only want me to not say good or bad, that's one thing. But if you don't really want me to label any of the synonyms either, like you were talking about with like the vocabulary, I was like, part of me was like, I don't understand the point, like how I'm going to do that. And then over the time, I realized like, this is just a piece of that process of understanding the dichotomy of control. So I didn't particularly love the presentation of this exercise, but I understood where they were going with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really just trying to help you, like, especially with the synonyms piece, it's like recognize the other labels that you use to describe things, things, people, places, events, what have you. so that you're tuning in your frequency, right? It's like turning the dial, getting that clear.
And how often we use them
Right.
as individuals, and how other people use them as well.
Right.
I mean, because it's fairly constant,
Right.
because we're trained really to label things good, bad, and various synonyms thereof.
Yeah.
Oh, what was that movie like? Because we're always asking each other, like you go back to the beginning, we're always asking each other for opinions based on good or bad in some way, shape, or form, because we might want to try it or we might not. We might want to avoid a restaurant that's brand new in our neighborhood. Or so if someone went, what did you think of it? It was okay.
Right, but the restaurant as a whole, I mean, again, it's being able to separate
their version of okay
the wheat from the chaff
versus
right?
whether or not you still want to try it.
Mm-hmm. But again, being able to identify what your judgments are and how you're assigning them, right? So back to your point, Sierra, I mean, it's not saying, no, you can't use these words. You can't use, great, fabulous, fun, exciting, awesome, woohoo, you can't use awful, terrible, disappointing, frustrating, whatever. It's just saying it's not like they have the exercise on 68 where they actually have you break it down and say, is this the Stoic use of good or bad? And it's basically, what you're choosing to label and being able to identify.
Give an example.
The thing. So for example, they have one, this cheesecake is awful. That was one. Is that a use of the Stoic good or bad? No, because you're talking about cheesecake. But basically what they said is you can rephrase it, you can reframe it and say, I don't really like this cheesecake. So the cheesecake is just cheesecake. It's just cheese and sugar and graham crackers mixed together. It's just the ingredients. To your point with the pen, similar thing. But those ingredients aren't bad. It's how your palate perceived the mixture of ingredients and something that you did not like.
And it's so less saying I really didn't like the cheesecake. It's like, okay, rather than this cheesecake sucks. It's the worst cheesecake I've ever had in my life. I can't believe anyone would eat this cheesecake. That tend to be what we do as how we communicate.
We 10x everything.
Yes, we do. Well, and that's partially, you think that's the social media influence around us too, right? We all become our own headline writers, essentially.
Right.
That everything's a headline, and it's got to be the most fantastic version of that.
Right. Like another great example, just to take it to a person versus a thing, we have the cheesecake awful. The cheesecake is not awful. It's just ingredients. You're a great driver. Well, that's your label of what you think a great driver is. Instead, no, that's actually not a good example. It's, I appreciated your driving, or I think
you got me from place A to place B is how I wrote that successfully.
That's a very sterile version of it. But you can still, but again, like that's almost like stripping the emotion, which is definitely what Sierra does not want to do. You can still have the feeling, but recognize that the feeling is what you're describing the feeling as. So you can still have appreciation. I really appreciate your driving. Thank you for going at a speed that I'm comfortable with, or whatever it may be, right? Rather than saying you're a good driver, you're a bad driver, identifying what you're using, what criteria you're using to determine good or bad, right? So I think those are two really good examples of it. Yeah. But then an example of one that is a good use of the Stoic good or bad, they have an I treated him badly. That's something that you can label, because that's something that you personally, you have a barometer of what is within your virtues of good or bad and how you're treating someone. Are you behaving within your sphere of virtuous behavior, or are you outside of that?
It's the lesson in a nutshell.
There we go.
Week 9.
All right, week 9 in the books.
But it's not in the books, because it's a constant evolving as we add these to our repertoires, if you will.
Great point.
To become
Rob
Stoic
Hunter.
human beings.
Great
As we
point.
move on to week 10, next week will be act the opposite, which ties into this lesson too. Because if we label things good or bad, all right, I want you to kind of do the opposite. So we'll, I'm looking forward to that discussion as well.
Don't
I
mindlessly
wonder,
pursue your desires or avoid.
I
that.
haven't read it yet, but I wonder if this involves like wearing your clothes backwards, like crisscross.
Nice.
Oh, maybe we should wear our clothes backwards.
Makes you want to jump.
It might. You never know. Those crazy Stoics. They got some.
But these are great lessons too that we apply into our courses too. So
Yep.
they become part of your everyday sort of language and mantra. Like that lesson in particular, I think is very, very handy for us.
Especially nowadays when everything is very sensationally labeled both by ourselves and by others. Just be in tune to that. Be in tune to the labels that you're hearing, that you're seeing, and that you're saying.
And how you're impacting your teams for your teamwork. If you label someone on your team a certain way, and if they have a great idea, you might discount that great idea because you think they're a jerk or whatever.
Right.